of HKIAC. Good morning, Sarah. It's actually evening, I think, in Hong Kong.
Yeah, good evening. Good morning to you.
It's still morning in Europe and midday in Moscow.
So this is a brunch.
And today we are going to cook lamb chops and pavlova. And I want to show to people what kind of products we need. For lamb chops, we need lamb chop, potatoes, olive oil, sea salt, rosemary leaves, green beans, and I believe you have everything on your table, right?
Yeah, it's all here.
Yeah.
Lamb chops,
Yeah, and tell us why you decided to prepare a lamb chop today.
Well, I'm from New Zealand, so this is a classic Kiwi dish. So lamb chops, and in New Zealand we produce very good lamb. So here we have some New Zealand lamb chops, and then to accompany the lamb chops, green beans, nice and fresh, and then potatoes. And the way we'll do the potatoes is we'll slice them really thinly and cover them in a bit of olive oil and sea salt and rosemary, and then we'll bake them in the oven. So it's really tasty, but also quite healthy. And then with the lamb chops and the potatoes, which are quite rich, then you have fresh green beans, and it's quite nice just to cut that richness.
I think the most difficult part in preparing this dish is to get good quality lamb chops. Because New Zealand lamb chops are not available everywhere, although they are pretty popular around the world. I just looked this morning into internet and found that in New Zealand you have 4 million population and 33 million sheep.
Yeah, it's a ratio of 1 to 10.
Population in New Zealand. And I also heard, I don't know whether it's true or not, that lamb is so popular, New Zealand lamb is so popular because when sheep are growing, they are growing in nature. So they're eating the grass. You don't feed them with antibiotics and some other chemicals. So the quality of lamb is extremely good. And it's also that you don't have wolves in New Zealand. Is it correct?
Yeah, that's right. We just have sheepdogs. We have no dangerous animal in New Zealand except for one obscure little spider that no one's ever seen. But apart from that, totally safe. So no predators.
So basically, they're growing by themselves in New Zealand. They're eating grass. They don't have any enemies. And what you do, you are just taking some of them. Of course, you are producing some wool. But apart from that, you produce a meat, which is a very good quality and it's not expensive. And this is why New Zealand lamb chops are so popular around the world, right?
Yep, that's right. Spot on.
Okay, so you've got some very nicely looking lamb chops, I see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how long it will take to prepare it?
So these are quite thick, so you'll probably want to put them on the barbecue, which will already be heated for a bit, for about 4 to 5 minutes each side, but probably more like 4. And then you'll want to see if it's, depends if you like it medium rare or medium. But yeah, so just 4 minutes each side. Okay,
tell me what is first to prepare lamb chops in a New Zealand style? What do you do first?
Okay, so first of all, we need to start with the potatoes because they take a bit of time. So what you have to do with the potatoes is you have to slice them quite thinly, and I'll show you how thin. So you're probably looking at about 3 to 4 millimeters. Like this, if you can see. And then what you want to do is put them in a bowl and put some olive oil on them and some sea salt and some rosemary. And I've got some rosemary here. Can you see that? All right.
Yes.
So basically 2 small sprigs, and you cut off the leaves and you sprinkle that in. And it's not too strong, but what it does do is it gives the potatoes a really nice flavor. You also need to turn your oven up very high. So I've got my oven on at 280 degrees Celsius, and I've already prepared the potatoes and put them out on a tray. I'll show you. Here you go. So I've put them on some oven paper, and they're all spread out, bit of olive oil, bit of rosemary, and I'm going to put those in the oven. And then in about 20 minutes, I'll check on them. They should be sizzling and starting to go golden. Okay, so these go in. And then for the lamb chops, we come back at about 15 minutes before you want to serve. 20 to 15 minutes before you want to serve, and we do the lamb chops and we do the beans at the same time. And then in between that, while the potatoes are cooking, we can prepare the dessert, the pavlova.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about pavlova. Okay. We also have ingredients. Just a second. We also have ingredients for pavlova.
Yeah.
First of all, why the dessert is called pavlova? It's well known around the world, but I know that it's extremely popular in Australia and New Zealand. Do you know the story?
Yeah, yeah, I do. So this is a dessert that's it's a light dessert. It's very airy. It's a soft meringue, and it was named Pavlova after the Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova. And in the early 1900s, she went on a tour down under, and she inspired a lot of people. She inspired a lot of dancers, and she inspired people so much that they named this dessert after her, Pavlova, in homage to her weightlessness and her delicacy of dancing. So, yeah, the Pavlova. Mine is not looking so delicate right now.
Yeah,
but it's an honest
I was able to find on the internet a very old video of Pavlova dancing, and I want to show it to you because it's really, really beautiful. She's dancing Dying Swan.
Yeah, this is one of her most famous dances, isn't it? The Dying Swan. Yeah.
Okay, so your dessert will be as beautiful as Pavlova, without any weight and without any risk of gaining weight, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, the 2 cups of sugar that go in here, they don't go anywhere.
Yeah, and I understand that to make the Pavlova dessert, the most important thing is to get this meringue.
Yeah, exactly. So basically this meringue is made from egg whites, so 6 egg whites, and then you add 2 cups of sugar, but you have to do it gradually. And then what you do is you heat it on low heat for an hour and a half, and it rises and it looks beautiful. And then you turn off the oven and you have to leave it in the oven for another hour. But during that time, it drops a bit. And so the thing you always are hoping is that it doesn't drop too much. But you know, it's if you just follow the recipe, you can get there. I mean, I've been able to do this. And what you do is once it's ready, then you cover it in whipped cream and fruit. So I can do that now, and then we can put that in the fridge and then come back. As you can see, I have everything prepared. One tip I would say is that in the recipe on the website, it says 300 milliliters of whipping cream, but I would say do a lot more, because then if your meringue is not quite perfect, you can really cover it with the whipped cream and it still looks really nice. So this was about 500 milliliters of cream. And I also put in a little bit of vanilla essence as well as caster sugar, because that gives it a little bit of a sweet flavor.
How do you make cream?
Oh, so you just buy liquid whipping cream, just liquid cream, and then you beat it on medium speed for about 10 minutes. It's really easy, but you need to have a nice kitchen utensil for mixing. So you see there, I've put on quite a thick layer. And now what you want to do is put on some nice fruit, and of course, kiwi fruit. And it's nice to have a lot of colors. So here I've got kiwi fruit. Just put that on around the edges. And then strawberries. In New Zealand and Australia, this is a real summer dessert. So strawberries are very popular. It's very popular during Christmas time, which of course in New Zealand and Australia is summer. Okay, so then strawberries. And then last of all, I've got some blueberries. Oops. Okay, and then just the final touch, a little bit of mint. Yeah, there you go.
Looks beautiful. And normally such kind of dessert, for how many people you prepare? Is it for?
Oh, this is for this would be enough for my husband and I.
Oh yeah, just for two.
Yeah, no, you could maybe 6.
Maybe 6. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and then you put that in the fridge.
Ah, you need to put it on the fridge for how long?
Yeah, just keep it in the fridge until everything else is ready, and then you can just pull it out and serve it after dinner. Yeah, and so it's a really nice dessert because, you know, often when you have dinner, you're feeling quite full, but then you do want to have dessert, but it's very light. So it's not like a heavy cake or something. It's good. Yeah.
Okay. I believe we, now you're going to do something with lamb chops, right?
So we still need to wait a bit for the potatoes, and then we can do the lamb chops and the beans a little bit later.
Okay, so we have to talk.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to show you some photos which you shared with me, and very nice photos. I was really impressed by these photos. This one,
Yeah.
where it is?
So that's at the top of an alpine crossing in New Zealand called the Tongariro Crossing. It's a 20-kilometer trek. It takes about 8 hours, and you cross over a volcanic crater, and you basically walk over 2 active volcanoes. And this is in the middle of the North Island of New Zealand, and it's I was born an hour east of this place, so it's quite a special place for me and my family. I've been doing this trek since I was a young person, and it's really changed a lot over the years. When I was young, it was very rugged, but now it's very, you know, there are a lot of amenities. When I was young, it would be, you know, yourself and your family and no one else, but now when you do it, you're with thousands of other people. So it's changed over the years, but it's absolutely spectacular. Yeah.
How often you do such kind of exercise now? How often you
Now,
go?
oh, well, you know, the beauty of Hong Kong is that while you have this dense urban area, in the middle of Hong Kong Island, it's mainly natural reserve. So there are miles and miles of hikes. And so hiking in Hong Kong is easier than many places. And in my home, I don't know if you can see out the window, but if you can see, it's you can see it's all bush.
Yes.
So basically 50 meters from our front door, there's a trail and up to the peak, and you can hike in there for hours. So I go several times a week. Yeah. Great.
This is very good. Okay, but the next photo impressed me the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is, first of all, this is a really, really good photo.
Yeah.
And what are you doing? You're playing rugby, or what is the sport?
Yeah, so this is touch rugby. So it's rugby, it's a form of rugby, but you don't tackle, you touch as the defensive move. So it's much less violent, let's say, less prone to injuries. And so this is me playing for the Netherlands in 2016 in Jersey in the European Championships, and we're playing Scotland. And we won that game. It was very close, but that try, I mean, everyone can see that that's a try, obviously, but that was not allowed by the ref. It was not awarded. So one of the most controversial moments in sporting history. Yeah.
Do you still play it now in Hong Kong?
Yeah. So Hong Kong is a great place for sports. I mean, the level of play in Hong Kong of touch rugby is very high because you have so many expats from many countries that play touch rugby. But at the moment, I play another sport more. It's a sport called netball, and that's also like touch rugby. It's very popular in New Zealand and in Australia and other Commonwealth countries, but probably not so well known by the rest of the world, but I play that a bit more now in Hong Kong, and it's also a very good standard of play. Yeah.
Is it not very hot in Hong Kong to play outside? Because my feeling is very hot and humid.
Yeah.
Humidity is very high, so it's not easy sometimes to play.
When I first came through Hong Kong, before I started working at HKIAC, I came to Hong Kong for a week just to meet everybody and I played a game of touch rugby. It was May. And I thought to myself as I was playing, I literally thought I was going to combust. I was so incredibly hot and I didn't know how I would handle playing sport outside. But now having lived here, it's quite incredible how much you adjust. And so now playing in May outside, it's hot, but it's totally fine.
Okay. So it's the series that the humans could survive everywhere.
Yeah, we can adjust.
Including
thankfully.
Yeah, okay. The other photo is also looks very interesting because you are something like a judge. Is it real hearing or is it mock hearing? What is it?
Yeah, so this is one of my other major hobbies has been improvisational theatre. So this is shot in Amsterdam. I was part of an improvisational theatre group, which basically does comedy shows. And we had a show every Friday night. And so the content of the show is completely improvised, but the format of the shows are created and written by whoever. And this format is called courtroom drama, and it was written by myself and the guy you see there on the right. And basically what we do is we get an offense from a member of the audience, and then we play it out in trial in a courtroom, and the evidence that's submitted is in the form of flashbacks or replays, where the actors play out what happened, and over the course of 45 minutes, we come to a resolution and a judgment. So, I mean, given my professional work, I was well suited to being the judge. But so that's something I did in Paris and Amsterdam. I don't do it here in Hong Kong. The scene is very different in Hong Kong, and I don't have so much time. It's a bit harder, especially with my travel, my pre-COVID-19 travel schedule, let's say.
Is it publicly available? Is it a possibility to see somewhere on YouTube?
Well, some shows have been filmed, but most of all, they are not filmed and then put up. Usually it's just live. There are plenty of photographs though. Yeah, but no, thankfully it's not videoed.
Okay. Well, but promise next time you're going to repeat it. You'll send an invitation to us so we could join you and see how you're performing, because okay. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could assume so. And also, I believe many people recognize this nice building because this is a PCA Peace Palace, and how this building is related to your professional career?
Yeah, well, this was a very important place for me for a long time in my life because I worked at the PCA for 10 years and I took this
10
shop.
years?
10 years, yeah, 2006 to 2016. Yeah. And this was I arrived at work one morning and this was what I saw. So I captured it. And yeah, no, it was a fantastic period of my life. You know, the PCA does amazing work, sees amazing cases, and The Hague is a beautiful place to live.
So you were involved in administration of cases at PCA, right?
Yeah.
Whether they were investment cases or public dispute between states, what was that?
Yeah, so I was involved in a number of interstate cases, and I was also on many investor state cases over the years. And I also did a lot of work on contract-based cases that involved a public entity, so a ministry or an organization, an international organization or an arm of the United Nations. So a real variety of cases, both public international law, but also commercial contracts, you know, really, but with a public entity. Yeah.
So you started to work at PCA after you graduated from the law school?
No, before that, I was at the ICC in Paris. I was there for 3 years. And before that, I was at Schliemann and Sterling for 1 year. So I was in Paris for 4. And before that, I was working for 3 years as a solicitor in Auckland. And before that, I went to the US for a little bit. And before that, I graduated. So yes, you don't want to accumulate years, Vladimir.
So you did spend 3 years with ICC Court?
Yeah. It was a great time.
Yeah, I understand it, but it was before I joined ICC, because I joined ICC, I believe, in 2009. So I was already at PCA.
Yeah.
But did you work on the Asian team or European team? Or
I was on the North American team.
Oh, North American team.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in total, you spent 3 years with ICC and then 10 years with PCA as working for case management, right?
Yeah, I was tribunal secretary for multiple tribunals, and I was registrar in interstate cases. Yeah, and I had one case involving Russia that was very special, but I think there's a photo coming up. But yeah,
it's unbelievable experience. It's very valuable. You know, working for such institutions like ICC and PCA will give you experience you will never get otherwise.
Yeah, you see hundreds and hundreds of cases, and you work, especially at the PCA as tribunal secretary, you know, you work very closely with different tribunals. And the cases that we were working on some of them were very, very important historical matters. And so we've got to work with some of the best tribunals that you will ever see. So it was a great experience. Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to leave. That's why I was there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Great place.
Next photo, tell me, what is it?
Yeah. This is inside the Peace Palace. This is the Russian vase. This was the first gift by a state to the PCA. It was from the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas II. And he was integral actually in the beginnings of the PCA because he had sent out an invitation to heads of state around the world in 1898 to come to a peace conference in The Hague in 1899 to discuss ways of resolving disputes between states that didn't involve going to war. And so really he was at the beginning of everything. And this was the first gift. It's made of jasper. It's from the Ural Mountains and it weighs over 3 tons. And you can see there it has the Romanov insignia, the double-headed eagle. I don't know if you can see it on that slide, but that's there. So yeah, really significant.
Yeah, well, when I first time saw this vase in PCA Palace, I was extremely proud because it's shame, of course, that I did not know it before, that PCA was created with active involvement from Russian Tsar Nicholas II. And I was extremely pleased to see this gift in PCA Palace from Russia, and it's still there.
Yeah.
By the way, are you checking the time? Are we okay
Yes.
with
I think I better check the potatoes. I'll do that very quickly.
Okay.
Okay, yep. So the potatoes are looking good. And what you need to do at this stage is just to like shuffle them around or turn them over and keep an eye on them, because you don't want them to burn, but you do want them to be crisp. So I will check on them again in maybe another 5 minutes, and then I'll turn down the heat a bit.
Okay, good. So we could continue with my questions. Just a second.
Okay, yeah, so this is...
Who are these people? Well, I could recognize here two faces. First of all, face, and second, Evgenia Guryacheva. She's still working for PCA.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who are the other people?
Okay, so so this is the tribunal in the Arctic Sunrise case brought by the Netherlands against Russia in 2013. And here you see at the front is President Thomas Mensa. He recently passed away, actually, just in April, I believe, this year. And then on the left, you have a Mexican diplomat, Professor Zikeli. And then next to me on my right, you have a Polish professor, Professor Simonides. And then in the back there behind Judge Mensa, you have Henry Burmeister from Australia. Then you have Evgenia Guryacheva, my former colleague. And then on the far right, you have Professor Soames, who is a Dutch professor and arbitrator. And yeah,
so
this was quite a...
In a state-to-state disputes, you have 5 arbitrators, no 3 or 1, as you have in commercial arbitration.
Yeah, you can have 3, but it's very common to have 5. And at the PCA, we even had one where there were 7. Yeah.
Yeah, and how these arbitrators are normally appointed?
Well, this was under the Law of the Sea Convention, and they were appointed by the President of the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, except for Professor Soames, who was appointed by the Netherlands. Russia was not participating in this case, and so they did not appoint an arbitrator.
Yeah, can you remind me what was the case about?
Yeah, so this was the case where a Greenpeace vessel had gone into the Arctic, and they were protesting against oil exploration and drilling in the Arctic. And there was a fixed platform owned by Gazprom in the Arctic that was going about oil exploration. So the Greenpeace vessel came along. It was flying under the Dutch flag, which is why the case was brought by the Netherlands. The Greenpeace people on board, there were about 30 people on board, and they set out to the fixed platform, and their aim was to attach themselves to the platform in a capsule and stay in that capsule to bring the world's attention to drilling in the Arctic. But in doing that, they were thwarted by Russian authorities. So they returned to the vessel, and then a day later, the Russian authorities boarded the Greenpeace vessel and arrested the crew and the vessel, took them to Murmansk, and the crew were detained for 2 months, and the vessel was kept for 6 months. And so the Dutch brought these proceedings against Russia, claiming that Russia had violated, by these actions, had violated their obligations under the Law of the Sea Convention. So that was a really interesting case in terms of how you can make arrests under the Law of the Sea Convention and that. And the hearings were held in Vienna, and it was a very congenial tribunal, and it was a memorable case.
Okay. How our potatoes are doing?
Good, but one is burning slightly, so I'm going to turn down the heat a bit. Yeah. So I've turned that right down, and I've opened the door a little bit, and now we can leave those to simmer a bit. What's the time? Okay, we've still got half an hour, so I could start doing the barbecue in maybe 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to go a little bit further with our questions.
Yeah.
Because we have a couple of more very interesting questions to you and some information to share to our participants, with our participants. This is a beautiful view of Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, so this is the view from my office at HKIAC. So yeah, spectacular.
Yeah, I remember I was in office of HKIAC a couple of years ago, and at that time I had a webinar with people from Belarus, and I was talking about new means of communication, international arbitration, and I at that time showed them that we could communicate being in different parts of the world, and the people were very jealous of how beautiful office is from HKIAC and how stunning view is from HKIAC office. I believe, I don't know who is paying your salary, but I believe they could pay you less just because that's beautiful.
Don't say that. Please edit that out of this webinar.
Okay. We will delete it. Talking about Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Hong Kong used to be under protection of UK, I believe more than 100 years. And then in 1997, the lease agreement lapsed and Hong Kong turned back to China. And now many people, especially in our part of the world, they don't know a lot what is the status of Hong Kong. Some people are saying, well, Hong Kong now is China, so it's the same, there's no difference. How, living in Hong Kong, how do you live? How do you feel the status of Hong Kong and, you know, coexistence with mainland China?
Yeah, well, you know, when it was handed over in 1997, that took place after quite extensive negotiations and the establishment of the Basic Law, which is Hong Kong's constitution, and which memorializes the concept of one country, two systems, because indeed Hong Kong is under the sovereignty of China, but it's a special administrative region, and it's set up so that it has a very high level of autonomy. And I think amongst, you know, around the world, it's probably the most autonomous special region that you'd find, because it has legislative, executive, and judiciary autonomy. And so basically what happened with the handover in 1997 was it was agreed that all of the laws that were in place at that time would continue, and the common law that was in place in Hong Kong would also continue. So what you have really is, in Hong Kong, you have a common law system. Mainland China is, of course, a civil law system, and the law is completely different. So Hong Kong is an enclave of common law with a long history of case law that started when, you know, when it was a British colony. So that's well entrenched and that's well developed, and there's no change there. That's the way it is now. And then if you know, it's really important to understand the Hong Kong court system. So common law, but then what you have is you have the highest court, which is the Court of Final Appeal. It used to be the Privy Council, but now it's the Court of Final Appeal, and how that court is made up. So it's made up of the Chief Justice, permanent judges, all of whom are from Hong Kong. So there are 4 permanent judges. And then you have 18 non-permanent judges who sit on cases in a kind of a roster system. And of those non-permanent judges, you have 3 Hong Kong judges and you have 15 foreign judges. And so the foreign judges are the most eminent judges from other Commonwealth common law jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Some names that will be familiar to people in the arbitration world will be Lord Hoffman, who's been on the court since 1998, Lord Neuberger, James Spiegelman, and last year, in 2018, the appointments were Lady Hale and Beverly McLaughlin, who is the Chief Justice of Canada, Supreme Court of Canada. And then last year, the most recent appointment was Lord Sumption QC. So those are the judges who are sitting in Hong Kong and deciding cases that come on appeal to the Court of Final Appeal. So it's very distinct from mainland China as a legal system that's definitely in place and still the same today. Hong Kong and China, mainland China, also have a separation in terms of immigration and customs. So for Hong Kongers going to mainland China, you have to have a visa and vice versa. So there is a lot of separation. There's also a lot of connection. And of course, you know, Hong Kong is under the sovereignty of China. There's no question about that. But yeah, as I've just described, there's a lot of autonomy. And some of those things, I would say, as someone living in Hong Kong, you know, we watch these things very closely. Obviously, they're relevant to our work. And in terms of the legal system, there's no change. That's the same. I understand, you know, perception is very much influenced by what we see, what we read, and the international media has, well, Hong Kong's been in the media a lot in the past year, and a lot of that has been quite negative, and there's been a lot of rhetoric about encroachment on fundamental rights in Hong Kong, but you know, the framework is the same. I mean, we can talk, I think we'll talk a bit about the protests, but yeah, it's a very complex situation, and we monitor it closely, but so far so good. And in terms of arbitration, it's business as usual. Yeah, so this is a shot.
Yeah, coming back to protests, because frankly speaking, living outside of Hong Kong and China, I have to admit, are you checking potatoes?
Yeah, I just checked the potatoes. I turned it off.
Okay. Living outside of Hong Kong, sometimes it was very difficult to understand why there are these protests and what exactly people want to achieve by it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what was the reason for people, what they are asking for?
Yeah, sure. So it all started in June with the proposal of the extradition bill by the chief executive in Hong Kong. And that was in response to a murder case where a young Hong Kong man had murdered his girlfriend in Taiwan. They'd gone there for a holiday and he'd killed her. He admits to it. Anyway, he came back to Hong Kong and there was no legal mechanism for Hong Kong to extradite him to Taiwan, for him to be prosecuted, and Hong Kong could not prosecute him because the murder took place in Taiwan. And the reason there was no legal mechanism is because back in 1997, at the handover, it was deliberately put in place that there would be no extradition between the 4 territories of China, so that they would be, you know, they would be separate in that respect. Now, the extradition bill made it possible on a case-by-case basis for Hong Kong to extradite people to different jurisdictions with which it did not have a bilateral extradition treaty. And what that meant is that in addition to Taiwan, people in Hong Kong could also be extradited to the mainland. Now, that was not something that Hong Kong people found acceptable because of the distrust that they have in the criminal justice system in mainland China. And so that's what led to this huge response by the Hong Kong people against the extradition bill. And you saw people come out, and by some figures in their millions, even up to 2 million with respect to one protest. And that was really quite a cross-sectional response. It included younger people, older people, professionals, students, the lawyers in Hong Kong. So that was quite a powerful response. And eventually the CE suspended the extradition bill, and then she completely withdrew it. But in the time it took for that to happen, a lot of things happened during protests. In Hong Kong, you have freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. That's it's very live, and it's very true in Hong Kong. But for demonstrations to take place, they need to be permitted, and they usually are. But the permission runs out, and at the end of the permission, then it's time for people to go home, and that's when we saw a lot of interaction with police. And not just then, but over the course of the weeks, some of the protests and some of the protesters would, there was a bit of property damage, there was a bit of violence sometimes, and there was a lot of concern that police conduct was violent and was out of line. And so what you saw develop was a very strong antipathy from the Hong Kong people towards the police force. And so there were 5 demands by the protesters. The first was the withdrawal of the bill. The second was an independent investigation into the police. And then the third was a demand by the protesters that one of the protests not be characterized as a riot, because that has certain consequences in terms of sentencing, but be classified differently. Another request was that all protesters who had been arrested be released. And then the final request was that Hong Kong have universal suffrage. That's a bit more complicated. It goes into the way the chief executive of Hong Kong, who is the leader of Hong Kong, is elected. So at the moment, that's by a commission, but there's a call for the chief executive of Hong Kong to be elected by the people of Hong Kong, and also that the Legislative Council, which is the legislature of Hong Kong, also be elected by the people of Hong Kong, which is not the current situation. It's quite I can talk about that if we want to go into those details, but basically Hong Kong people have never had the ability to elect, first of all, the governor when it was a British colony, and now the chief executive, now that it's a region of China. So in a nutshell, that's what it's about. Yeah, but very complex, very challenging time for the city.
But now with this coronavirus situation, I believe the protests are over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really quelled things. I think that in Hong Kong, the protests, they started off taking place on weekends, and then people would go to work and it was fine. And it really was business as usual for quite a long time. And then things kind of took a turn for the worse around November and December, and reached a bit of a peak. And after that, things stopped. You know, I think that was a combination of Christmas coming. I think it was also a combination of people just being tired of what was going on. And then, of course, we get into January and COVID-19 hits. And that really hits mainland China hard. And, you know, Hong Kong, we border mainland China, COVID-19's hitting in the south of China. And so, so that preoccupied everybody. And Hong Kong lived through SARS. So the response was really fast. You saw everybody wear masks immediately, except for some expats who took a bit of time, but even now that's changed. And, you know, we're really lucky we have over 1,000 cases, maybe, but 1,050, I think, cases. We've had 4 deaths. And so I feel like I'm in one of the safest places at the moment. And I think a lot of that is because Hong Kong lived through SARS. But that meant that Hong Kong shut the border with mainland China pretty strictly and quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shall we move to the next step in our cooking?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to do quickly the beans. And so very simple. I think it's nice just to steam beans because you don't want them to be all, you know, overcooked and limp. So you just want to cut off the edges. And then I don't own a steamer, but what I do have is a saucepan and a sieve. I'll show you. So here you have a saucepan and a sieve, and then I'll just place the beans in here. There you go. And I'll boil this for about 3 minutes, and then I'll turn it off and just let the beans rest there. Okay, and now should we go out to the barbie?
Okay.
Okay, we'll take the lamb chops. I'll just put a little bit of sea salt on them. Okay. Okay, so here is the barbecue, and I was telling Vladimir before, yesterday it was 30 degrees, beautiful day, and today it rained cats and dogs, and at about midday it looked like Armageddon from my office window. So here's the barbie. I've already had it on for about 10 minutes. So just pop them on and close that, and then we'll check them. We'll turn it up. Yeah, so it's on quite high heat, and then I'll check them in about 2 minutes.
Okay, it's easy.
Easy. It's just, there's a lot of things to balance at once, but it's like multiple proceedings. We like that in arbitration.
You have very nice view also from this side of the apartments.
Yeah, this is the bougainvillea plant on my terrace, which is really beautiful. And well, we have a big building in front of us, so we enjoy looking at the back of that building. But I think if you can see, there's a view of the harbour.
Yes.
And there's a ship just passing at the moment. So
Yeah.
It's lovely.
And I've heard that immovable property in Hong Kong is extremely expensive.
Yeah, it's very expensive. It's the most expensive place I've ever lived. I think my current apartment is 5 times what I paid in The Hague. Yeah, you just have to blindly pay and accept the fact that it's like that, because there's no way around it.
But in terms of safety and criminal situation in Hong Kong, is it a safe place to live?
Yeah, no, it's really safe. I mean, as a woman, it's very safe. You walk around late at night, and I've never felt threatened at all. It's quite special for that. So, you know, apart from everything that was happening last year, it's a great place to live, and it's also very compact, so you can get around 10 minutes here and there. And as I said, you can hike. Oh, you can see that they're already yeah.
Can you please, could you please move? Oh yes, I can see.
Yeah, you can see they're cooking already quite well.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, still needs a bit. Yeah.
You don't have any pets at your home?
No, I'd like to buy a kitten, or maybe 2 kittens, but it's just a matter of finding them. And there are a few rescue cat options, but they're quite strict with how with your apartment. So they say that you have to put a grill on your window and things like that, because they're worried about cats falling from a great height. So I haven't quite found where I can get a cat from. Oh well.
Yeah, because I heard that, you know, because of very strict regulation, it's not easy to have pets in places like Hong Kong.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about Hong Kong is that, well, a lot of people have cats and dogs, and because a lot of people have helpers here, they actually have a lot of, you often see helpers walking around with dogs and taking dogs for a walk. So yeah, makes it a bit easier.
Okay. How are chops?
Through those slides.
I'm a little bit concerned about lamb because I don't want it to be over grilled.
Yeah, no, that would be a disaster.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move a little bit with the slides while you're cooking. Let's talk a little bit about HKIAC. You joined HKIAC when and which year?
I joined in 2016 in September.
Okay. You see here the number of cases, all cases, I believe are here. And the number is flat for the last 10 years. But I understand that here, there are not only arbitration cases, there are other cases, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we also have mediation cases counted in this, as well as domain name disputes. And if you see in 2009, 2010, those figures are very high because we were doing hundreds of mediations back then attached to the Lehman Brothers. So coming out of the financial crisis, HKIAC, obviously well before my time, put in place a special scheme to mediate a lot of the Lehman Brothers disputes. So those were busy years for that.
Yeah, what I noticed with many institutions, they had a kind of peak of cases in 2009 and 2010, which is a reflection of financial crisis at that time. And I believe more cases will be coming this year because also now is a time of crisis.
I think so.
But what is interesting here, it's a number of administered cases, which is arbitration administered cases. And as you could see from these slides, the number of administered cases is growing. The growth is pretty significant. We look into 2009, when there were 29 cases, and then 10 cases in 2010. Now, in 2019, you have 173 administered cases. It's remarkable growth.
Yeah, it's really because of Hong Kong's history, and that Hong Kong was very much an ad hoc arbitration jurisdiction. That's really where it all started. But then in 2013, HKIAC put out its first set of what I would call truly administered arbitrations, where you see multiple contact points between the proceedings and the institution. So, for example, deciding in contested matters whether or not there should be expedited proceedings, also whether or not there should be consolidation and joinder. So all of these kinds of tools were introduced in 2014, and what we see is that those tools are really useful and they've been taken up really well, especially in our international disputes. So 95% or so of our international disputes are under our administered rules.
Yeah. Frankly speaking, my general observation is that parties, when they choose an institution, they expect more involvement from institutions with regard to administration of cases. So they really expect that institution will follow what is going on with the terms, with the appointment of arbitrators, and so on and so forth. So I think this statistics reflects that the parties appreciate when Hong Kong not just serve as appointing authorities in a ad hoc administration, but rather takes, I would say, more heavy administration of cases rather than light administration.
Yeah, I think it's really useful because otherwise parties can find themselves in positions where they spend months pleading a procedural issue, and if they had a set of rules that had a roadmap for that issue to be determined by an institution, it would take much less time. So it's really important, and cases are so much more complex, so you need to have tools. So this is the average amount in dispute in our administered cases, and I guess the basic takeaway is we see between 20 and 45 million has been the average amount in dispute over the last 3 years. But of course, we're dealing with a wide range of cases, from your very small contract for electrical supplies in Hong Kong through to your $1.5 billion joint venture involving multiple parties that didn't go well. So, this is the average, how it averages out. And not all cases are quantified. So.
Frankly speaking, Sarah, I don't believe that the high amount of average amount in dispute is good, because it actually indicates that the institution is more concentrated on a big cases rather than the small and middle-sized cases, while institution has to serve all business, not just large business. We cases, do. Of course, the average amount would be reduced, but it's good because you're serving more business needs, not just big sharks, but also some small fishes. And
it's a whole mix.
Okay, with regard to nationality, what I notice, you have Hong Kong as a top 10, first place on top 10 users, and mainland China, which is expected. And you have BVI, and I was surprised because normally when you have BVI and then you have Cayman Island, it's normally that there are some nationalities hiding behind BVI or Cayman Islands. If it would be ICC or Stockholm or I would say the parties behind BVI most likely are Russian parties.
Well, for us it's mainly mainland Chinese interests, but there's a lot of cooperation going on in those jurisdictions, yeah. But that's often where, within the corporate structure, you'll find that it's mainland Chinese interests, yeah.
Oh, okay, so still using BVI or Cayman Islands as a special.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots.
And because of that, there are a lot of disputes coming from these companies. Wow, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And also, in terms of nationality of arbitrators, I'll notice that UK arbitrators are often appointed even than Hong Kong. Of course, because of some historical reasons and because of common law, right, being the main law in Hong Kong.
Exactly. Yeah, so this graph shows appointments by parties and by HKIAC, and you're right, Vladimir, in that it's really a lot to do with the historical context of Hong Kong, and that in Hong Kong you find many British lawyers who've been here for years. You also find Hong Kong Chinese who have British passports, so they count for statistical purposes as British. So that explains that high number. And also because Hong Kong law is based on English law. So yeah, and also English law is our #2 most popular governing law. So it's Hong Kong, English, and then mainland Chinese.
Okay.
And a whole spread.
I just want to pause here to check how we're going with our beans. At what stage we are now?
Oh, good. Yes. Okay. They're looking good.
Beans are ready.
Okay, so the beans are looking good. So actually, Vladimir, I think that I'm ready to serve the dish.
Okay.
Okay, so here, let me just do this and then I'll show you the final result. I also have to get the potatoes. Okay, and let me just, I'll disappear for a second and get some potatoes. Okay, we're done. Here you have.
Yeah, can you, we need to have more light on it. Ah, that is.
Yeah.
Do you also decorate it with some herbs?
I like the way you think. Here we go, some rosemary.
Oh, okay.
And also, if you want a bit more color, you can have cherry tomatoes would look very nice. So that's your main dish, and then we'll take you back to what comes after, which is the Pavlova, the homage to Anna Pavlova.
This is beautiful. Don't forget to make photos and send it to us because we will be publishing. Okay. So we need to have original photos made and of your dishes made under your guidance. So, okay. A couple of more questions before we finish, because I understand that lamb is to be eaten while it is hot. Just a second. Interim measures arrangement. I understand that there's some movement in HKIAC rules and the law which makes HKIAC arbitration more efficient. Can you tell us briefly what it is about?
So this is an arrangement that came into force last year in October. It's an agreement between the Supreme People's Court of Mainland China and the Hong Kong government. And it's really important, especially for parties that are in contracts and the assets at the end of the arbitration are in mainland China and you want to be able to secure them with interim measures. So prior to this arrangement, you could only go to the mainland Chinese courts for interim measures to support arbitration if your arbitration was in mainland China and being administered by an arbitral institution in mainland China. But now with this arrangement, you can seat your arbitration in Hong Kong, so you can have a model law jurisdiction, you can have a common law court system. You can have an independent court system supervising your arbitration, and it needs to be administered by a qualified institution, and HKIAC is one of them. So you seat your case in Hong Kong, but by virtue of this arrangement, you can now access the mainland Chinese courts for interim relief with respect to assets, evidence, and conduct. And since this came into effect, we've had 21 applications. And if you keep going through the animations, Vladimir, you'll see that the amount of assets that have been applied for protection is about 6.3 billion RMB, which is US dollars 890 million. And the number of court orders that have been given by all these mainland Chinese courts in red cover 2.5 billion RMB worth of assets. So that's US 353 million. So you see a significant material commercial advantage if you seat your case in Hong Kong and you go to HKIAC in terms of protecting assets and evidence and conduct in mainland China. So that's been that's one of the most important things that's happened between Hong Kong and mainland China for foreign users of arbitration. I would say in the last 20 years, it's so significant. So yeah, so that's exciting.
In the meantime, we've got a question from Peter McQueen, where he is asking you, where is the mint sauce to go with the lamb chops?
Peter is from Australia, and so he's probably a bit biased against a New Zealander cooking lamb chops and just trying to poke holes.
Okay, it's good that he's
right. Mint sauce is delicious with lamb chops.
It's good that he's not disputing the way you are doing pavlova, because I understand there's also dispute between Australian and New Zealand people.
Yeah. We have to go to the ICJ on that.
Who invented the pavlova dessert.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to a couple of last slides, because our time is almost over. We saw this photo when we have a kitchen with Kevin Nash. And of course, I could not ask you the same question. How it happens that you were together with, was he Medvedev president of Russia at that time or prime minister at that time?
Prime minister, yeah. It was last year, and we were at the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum, and we had a chance to meet with Prime Minister Medvedev for about 20 minutes. He met with the international contingent, and he was surrounded by bodyguards at the time just prior to this photo, but I managed to get up to him and ask him for a photograph, and then cross-institutional cooperation there you see in full form, and so there you have Hong Kong, HKIAC and CIAC represented with Prime Minister Medvedev.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that generally HKIAC pays a lot of attention to Russia, and HKIAC was the first foreign arbitration institution which received permission from Russian government to administer disputes with seat in Russia, which was the development really welcomed in Russia, because frankly speaking, there are so far 2 foreign institutions licensed for such kind of activity, which is Hong Kong and Vienna Center. And I understand that there were a lot of events, but do you have a feeling whether the number of Russian cases coming to HKIAC is increasing or not? Do you have any statistics you got?
So over the last 5 years, we've had 20 cases involving Russian parties, and we saw a lot more last year than in previous years. But most of those cases are still cases seated in Hong Kong. So we haven't yet started to see what I would say would be the outflow of cases following our being granted permanent arbitral institution status. But that was granted in April 2019, and I would predict we're looking at a year to 18 months before we start to see those cases come through. But I do know I've been to Russia 9 times in the last 2 years, and I've spoken to a lot of businesses and lawyers, and I know that we're going into clauses, a lot of waterfall clauses, so as well as other clauses, and we get a lot of inquiries. So I would expect those cases to start coming up in the future.
Yeah, I can confirm from my side as a practicing lawyer, I see more and more references to HKIAC in various arbitration clauses. So I believe we'll certainly see some increase of Russian cases in coming years.
Yeah.
Okay. these were all my questions to you today. We ask all the people who are watching our webinar or us on YouTube to donate some funds, or whatever the amount does not matter, as much as you can to World Health Organization. The interview was taken by Vladimir Khvaley. I'm chairman of the board of Russian ArbitRAAtion Association, a partner of Baker McKenzie Moscow. Thank you very much, sir, for your lesson how to cook real, lamb chops and pavlova dessert, especially. It's fascinating. And the talk about Hong Kong HKIAC. It was very learning. I've got a lot of very interesting, useful information from first hands, and I hope to see you in person very soon.
Me too. Thank you very much, Vladimir. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.